I got a comment from Jack's World talking about the Vatos gang. So naturally, of course, I've spent every waking moment since then thinking, rewatching, crafting, and obsessing over the best explanation I could think of. So that's what today's video is going to be about, is what I think happened to the Vatos gang. It's been a while since we've seen this group, so I'll give a quick recap for those who don't quite remember. When Rick first entered Atlanta and got swarmed by the horde of zombies, he dropped a bag of guns when he made his great escape into the tank. After locking Merle on the roof and getting out of the city, they meet Daryl, who is furious that they left his brother to die. So the group decides to go back for Merle and Rick's bag of guns. When they find that Merle cut off his hand and he's nowhere to be seen, they decide that they'll grab the bag of guns and then scout the surrounding areas for Merle together. But unfortunately, things don't go exactly to plan, and when they go to get the bag of guns, a group kidnaps Glenn, trying to get the guns for themselves. Daryl also takes a hostage. This is how we're introduced to the Vatos gang. They decide to meet up to get Glenn back. The two groups can't agree on what to do with the guns and begin drawing their weapons to fight. But all of a sudden, an older woman walks out, looking for one of the men. Not understanding what's going on, she talks to Rick, who's in his uniform, telling him to not arrest her grandson. Rick explains he's not there to arrest anyone, they're just looking for a missing person, Glenn. She says she's seen him and to follow her, inviting them inside. She holds Rick's hand, leading them through the retirement home, and as they walk through the halls, they see the young people are taking care of and protecting the elderly who were left behind. Rick and Guillermo, the group's leader, decide to split the guns between them, and then they leave. But this isn't the last we see of the Vatos. In a deleted scene, they leave the CDC and they go looking for shelter at the Vatos hangout. When they arrive, they find the place had been attacked, everyone killed by a gunshot to the head. Daryl brings this up with a great point that the dead didn't do this, but the living did. This has left fans speculating for years. What happened to the Vatos gang? I'm going to go over 4 theories that I think could be possible to answer this mystery. So the first theory I'm going to cover is the most popular one among fans, which is that the governor is responsible. When talking about this, a lot of people reference to the Rise of the Governor book because around this time in the show, he'd be in Atlanta in the book. But something important to remember is the book is based off the comic universe, not the show universe. And even though it's technically based on the same character, their stories are very, very different. So we can't use this book to piece together this story. I drew out a little timeline so we can visualize important events a bit easier. 2 really important factors to keep in mind is the amount of time that it would have taken to build the Woodbury walls, and remember that Penny dies before the governor finds Merle, because Merle never meets Penny to our knowledge. There are several clues in the show that allow us to speculate the timeline of events, like things Milton had said, the governor's notebook, and the state of Penny's reanimated corpse. I believe Penny died not too long before the governor and Merle meet. I think she lived inside the Woodbury walls after its completion. I talk more about what I think happened to her and how I think she died in my previous video, what Tales of the Walking Dead could have been, and I named that episode Blood Bonds if you want to go watch that. But proof of this would be the governor's notebook. Michonne finds the names of dead people, and Penny is the 24th on the list, which means 23 people died before her. And I don't think the governor would have named unimportant people by name. So I feel like all 23 of those people had to have been people he cared about, and I don't think that would have happened instantaneously at the beginning of the apocalypse. I feel like that's kind of something that took some time. Milton, when talking about the governor, says he knew Philip before he became the governor. That man still exists, implying that the governor wasn't always such a stone-cold killer, that he used to be a normal, average guy. This other version of him, I think, is referring to before Penny's death. And my last supporting fact is that we see her reanimated zombified corpse chained in the governor's apartment. She isn't very decayed. She's just starting to lose hair, but other than that, she looks fairly normal for a zombie. I think Penny dies around the time Rick entered Atlanta for the first time, so how I think the governor and Merle meet is when the governor's out scavenging for supplies. With his group, they find the box truck that Merle stole. They open the back to see if there's anything inside, when they find a barely conscious Merle, weak from blood loss and dehydration. When the governor raises his gun to put him out of his misery, Merle says something along the lines of, "I ain't dead yet, prick." The governor sees the fight still left in Merle and decides to bring him back to Woodbury, thinking he could be useful. When Merle tells him his story of what happened to him and the Dixon brothers' plans to rob the quarry camp, I think this would inspire the governor to start attacking other groups. He decides he's going to start killing other groups before they can kill them, and steal their supplies with the help of Merle, who becomes his right-hand man once recovered. So with all this information in mind, it doesn't really make sense that the governor would be in Atlanta during this time, and it also doesn't make sense that he'd be attacking other groups yet. I think his killer tendencies would develop and be fueled when he meets Merle, who wouldn't be healed enough to be killing such a large group like the Vatos yet. This next theory is really short because there's not a lot to support it, but I did want to throw it in here because, it could be possible. So let's discuss the Claimers. This group is located in Georgia, and it's unclear exactly how early on the group formed. They're willing to kill, among other things, to take supplies from others. So it is possible that they could be behind this, but there's not a lot of evidence to support that they're behind this crime, other than the simple fact of being in the area and that the supplies were missing. I also have to wonder if a group this small could pull off an elaborate attack like this. So this is up to you if you want to believe this one. Alright, moving on to the theory I think is the most fun, which is, could it be the CRM? I haven't seen anyone else tie them to the Vatos gang, but it's a theory I came up with due to several signs you see pointing to this being a possibility. The biggest sign is when Rick first entered Atlanta, he saw a helicopter. Yes, it could have been the National Guard that is later killed by the governor, but it could also be the CRM helicopters. There's no proof that it's not a CRM helicopter. We know that the Civic Republic is established very early on in the apocalypse, and their military was developed early on as well. After the napalm bombing of other cities, maybe they decided to scout those areas for useful supplies or signs of life, looking for people that they thought could make good soldiers. So how they would meet is once again completely up to speculation, but for story's sake, let's just say when exploring the city, they run into the Vatos gang at their retirement home. When the CRM arrived, the Vatos gang let their guard down because they thought the military was there to help them. The CRM would offer the men to join their forces, but none would be interested in abandoning the elderly. The CRM would decide that caring for the old folk was a waste of precious resources, and that these people were just too difficult to fall in line, so they killed them to take supplies for themselves. If you notice, no attackers were killed, or at least none that we can see, because the CRM doesn't like to leave a trace. Plus, with their numbers, it would be really easy for them to overwhelm the Vatos. The evidence that supports this theory is the helicopter, the attack they lead on Omaha later on, showing their character that this is something that they're willing to do to preserve themselves and to save resources, and lastly, the lack of dead attackers on the scene. Something else I would just like to throw in there is a line that the Vatos leader himself says, which is, "The weak get taken." This would be a perfect way to show Rick's group the reality of what Guillermo said to them, and lay a foundation for the big, strong, brutal group we learn about later on in the show, showing that the CRM had been right under our noses the entire time. Alright, and lastly, a theory that I'm not a big fan of. Maybe it's just another random group that we never encounter, but that is not fun, so I'm choosing to ignore this option. Alright, those were all the theories that I wanted to cover in this video. Those are the ones that I think are the most possible, and as usual, if you agree or disagree, or you want to expand on any of these theories, feel free to do so in the comments, and if there's something else you'd like me to talk about, comment that as well. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye!